Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski.
Today on the podcast, we're back with an Ohio native who then went to Bowling Green, set records all the way from high school through university, on the roads, national championships, Olympic trials, famous teammates, and coaching. Great coaching success. A Hall of Famer in many areas. Welcome today on the podcast, Paul Talkington. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Matt.
Paul, let's tell people your origin story. Let's see how much you remember. When, how, and why did you first become a runner?
My first memories of running, I grew up in a very small town. There was maybe 200 people in it, called Burgles. I went to Burgles Elementary, and that was the first time I was introduced to running. As a seventh grader, we had a track day with the eighth graders, seventh and eighth graders, and I was in the half mile. I won the race, and I finished in minutes, 18 seconds, which I thought was pretty good for a seventh grade. Then I went from the elementary to Springfield Local High School, where I played football freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. I also ran track my freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year. We didn't have a track at our school. My coach was the math teacher. So he went out behind the school and he drew a 300-yard circle in the field. And that's where we ran and practiced.
You obviously didn't have any home meets, right?
No, never had a home meet.
What kind of shoes did you train in?
Just like Converse shoes.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Seventh grader 218. And you said,
Yes.
Oh, that's a pretty good time. Did you,
Yes.
at some point, when did you start getting serious success as a racer and track? And how did that affect your identity? At some point, did you say, hey, I'm a runner?
My freshman year, I ran but didn't do well. My sophomore year, I was a distance runner. I ran the 880 and the mile. My sophomore year, I ran, I think it was about 5:45 in the mile. 800 was maybe 2:10. My junior year, I ran about 2:05 in the half mile, and the mile I ran 2:35 at the state meet, 4:35.
Okay, so you were winning races at least by your junior year.
Yes. I went to the state meet. I think I finished fifth. My senior year, I was running well. I broke the school record in the mile. I went to the state meet and ran the mile, didn't run the 880 there, but I ran the mile, and the state meet was the first loss that I had the entire year. I finished second place. I still remember the boy's name. It was Jonathan Jones from Sunbury Big Walnut High School. And as I said, that was my only loss for the entire year, and I ran 4 minutes and 30 seconds.
How did you handle losing for the first time?
Oh, I was upset, but my mother was more upset than I was. She actually came out of the stands and ran. I fell after the race. I fell in disgust of getting second. And she came down on the track and helped me up, which I was really embarrassed about. But in that race, I was winning the race until the last 100 yards. And the Jones passed me. And of course, I got second.
Okay, so that's your senior year. By then, you've got a couple state medals. What did you think of your future in track? Was that something you saw going forward you were going to be doing? What kind of student were you?
Oh, I was AP student. My track coach, Gary Crow, he had sent a few letters to colleges. One that I remember was Hillsdale College in Michigan. He sent one to Bowling Green, and there was another I don't remember, but he got it return mail from Bowling Green, and I decided that I would go there. I spoke to Mel Brote, who was the coach then. He said he would like to have me to come to Bowling Green, but he could not offer me any money. So I decided to go there, and I started training in the summer before my freshman year. I was working on a Christmas tree farm. I was playing around, throwing rocks at this old building, and I twisted my knee and tore cartilage, the medial meniscus. When I went to Bowling Green, I ran our first cross-country race at Miami, and the knee gave out on me, so I never finished the race. That was the only race I ran as a freshman.
Wow.
I then had to go to the hospital, and they did surgery. I guess they took the piece out that ripped off.
What did you know about Bowling Green before you got there? How did you pay for college?
I knew nothing about Bowling Green, nothing. It just invited. I went up an invite just to see what the school was like, and I was impressed with it. Mel Brote couldn't give me any money to go to school, and said I can find you a job in the cafeteria. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I'll go. But my entire 4 years at Bowling Green cost me $4,000. And the only money I had to get was $350 from a federal loan. And I paid it off when I graduated.
Good for you. Okay. You missed your freshman first season. What was for you the transition like going from not running a race longer than a mile to university distances?
I should mention that we never had cross country then. I'd never ran a cross country race, so it was all track. First race, I tore my knee, didn't race again until my freshman year in track. My best mile was 4:45, and I ran a 2:04.88. Change from high school to Bowling Green was a major change. I never knew that people ran that fast before.
No more winning every race at that level. Yeah.
No, as I said, I didn't do my freshman year. Sophomore year, I trained all summer, came back. I was third or fourth man on the team almost instantly. I had trained very well during the summer. At the end of the year, I was given the most improved runner, and Mel decided that I deserved a partial scholarship. So they gave me a third of a scholarship. Sophomore year during track, I improved considerably. I gave up on the mile. I wasn't a good miler, and I found that distantly over the mile, I ran the 2 mile, 3 mile, and the 6 mile. Those are the races I ran during the meets. The 2 mile during my sophomore year, I think I ran about 9:10. 3 mile was about 14:20. The 6 mile, I ran about 31 minutes. In my junior year, my times improved. 2 mile was probably 9:05. 3 mile around 14:07. And the 6 mile, I ran about 30 flat.
By your junior year, were you winning races at Bowling Green?
Yes, I was winning cross-country races. And when track season came, I was running very well in the distance running. The 2, 3, and 6 were now my main races. Once in a while, I ran a mile in a relay.
When was the first time you qualified and went to nationals?
My junior year, I went to Berkeley, California, ran the national 6 mile. I think I finished about fifth. That was in track. I never went to nationals in cross country until my senior year. And we ran in Van Cortlandt Park. I guess it's New York. Don't remember, but I finished 45th. Sid Sink was there. But just to mention that, Sid Sink, I was a junior when Sid Sink came into Bowling Green. And the next year, I was a senior. Dave Waddle came in.
How good was your team then?
My senior year, we were very good in cross country. And in track, we had some very good distance runners and some very good sprinters. But few of us went to nationals, not very many. My senior year, I ran the mile in 4:14. 2 mile was 8:59. And the 6 mile, I ran 29, about 29:30. Now, I do have all these times and distances copied down. I started recording everything my freshman year in high school, and I have every year I recorded it, my workouts and my races.
Wow. Let's talk about the coaching progression all the way from high school to college. What quality of coaching did you have in high school and then at Bowling Green?
High school didn't run a whole lot. As I said, we had a grass track, 300-yard track, drawn out by our math teacher in a field. Most of my workouts, I ran 2:20s and 4:40s. I remember one time, the most I ever ran, I ran 20 for a workout.
In high school? That was in high school, huh?
In high school. Maybe 5 or 6 times we went out on the roads to train distance running, but that's about it.
How did coaching change for you when you went to Bowling Green?
My track coach in high school, he had never coached track before. I think it was his first year of teaching. We didn't have cross country. Well, I did. In the fall, I played football. Spring, I ran track. He told me he didn't know a lot about track and he didn't know how to make out workouts. So I just ran whatever came around. As I said, most of my workouts were 2:20s and 4:40s. Very little distance.
And how did you adjust and what was it different about Bowling Green?
Oh, there was a major distance. Mel Broad, he was a great coach. When I first went in, he never offered me any scholarships to go to Bowling Green, but the distances increased tremendously. We had very strong workouts. We'd run a lot on the roads. I was probably averaging 10 to 15 miles a day in workouts. I remember at one of our banquets after my junior year, Mel said, I never expected him to do any good at this school, but he really surprised me.
What was your best successes then at Bowling Green? What did you accomplish?
I did get a bachelor's degree, but I was there to run. I loved running. At that point, I loved running, and I did anything I could do to run there. During the whole year, I would not go home except at Christmas. I didn't want to leave the campus because I wanted to run there. That's the only times I'd come home, Christmas time and the end of the year. Mel was a great coach. He worked us really hard. I remember one of our cross-country workouts, we ran 24 440s, and I averaged 52 seconds, or 62 seconds for each of the 440s. That was my average over the time.
So where was your best accomplishment, your race performance, your All-American? How did senior year accomplishments go?
Senior year, I improved. That's where I ran my 4:14 mile. I did run the 800 once in a while. I ran 1:57, but 2, 3, and 6 were main races. I ended up running 8:59 in the 2 mile. I was about 14:03 in the 3 mile, and I ran 29:59 for the 6 mile. I won the All-Ohio several times, went to the Nationals twice. I ran at Berkeley, California. Berkeley was a great place at that time. It's not real exciting to go there anymore, but Jerry Lindgren was running it. I ran against him in the 3 and the 6 mile.
Who won?
Excuse me?
Who won?
Who what?
Who won?
Oh,
You said you raced Jerry Lindgren.
yeah, of course he won. He smoked the field. He was a great runner. I think I finished maybe 15th. I have it written down somewhere, but
Did you get an All-American? Did you get from Bowling Green?
no idea. My best finish in the Nationals was my senior year in Tennessee. And of course, Frank Shorter won the race. I finished 8th, and that's where I ran my best time.
That was the 6 mile?
Yes.
You love running. Stayed at school through all the weekends to always run. You graduated with a degree. All right. Famous guy. Everybody knows the name Dave Waddle because of his historic run in the Olympics. What kind of teammate was he? How good of friends were you and Dave?
Sid Sink and Dave were my best friends there. We ran together all the time. But when he was a freshman, he wouldn't run any morning workouts. Sid and I ran mornings at 6 o'clock every morning. Dave, he probably didn't start running morning workouts until he was a sophomore. But his time dropped to like probably 5 to 10 seconds after he started running in the mornings. They started being great, and I had set 14 records when I was at Bowling Green. And I think by the time that Dave and Sid had graduated, they had broken all of it.
What was the span of distances of the records that you held? From the 6 mile down to what did you set records while you were at Bowling Green?
So the 2 mile, 3 mile, and 6 mile.
You had indoor and outdoor records. So
Indoor, not very many.
you said you set 14 records. I mean, you broke your own record several times.
Yes, I did.
Okay. What happens as you come upon graduation? Let's put this in perspective for everybody. What year did you graduate Bowling Green?
1969.
All right. So we haven't even entered the 70s yet. What was going on with equipment, facilities? Were you on artificial tracks during this time at all?
At Bowling Green, I think it was my junior year, we built a rubber track. Our track team and our cross-country team got together, and along with, of course, Mel Brook, they were putting in a tartan track. And that was amazing. Came back to school after Christmas. They said, we're going to put in a tartan track, and we need all your help. We went out. They came out with this big tanker truck, started at like the 100-yard line, went the entire distance around the track, and it was finished. Except it had hardened during that time, and it's not hard, but the rubber solidified. And as my part and a couple other guys, we crawled the entire length of the track with the little pieces of tartan and spread them on it before it dried.
Yeah.
The little chunks. So it wasn't real smooth.
How long did that track last that you put your back and hands and knees into?
No, I'm not sure. When I left, it was the same track. It looked the same. But you ask about, I don't know if you can see these. These were my cross-country shoes.
Kind of
At
medium
4
spikes, long spikes? Yeah.
Yeah, they were about half-inch spikes. They're Pumas, but that's what I ran cross-country in all 4 years.
Let's talk about some of the other people. You mentioned Frank Shorter. This is, of course, before he gained national and worldwide fame with the Olympics. What was the state of running when you graduated in 1969, and what was your outlook for what you would be able to do to continue as a runner?
I went to student teaching. Then my student teaching I assistant coached it was Norwalk High School, but I was the assistant coach during cross country. I graduated in December. From that point till I got married, which was 69 through 70, I didn't run at all. I stopped running. And I got married. I was 128 pounds my senior year in track. After I got married and before I started running again, I went up to 190. And
Wow.
Did
you take any photos? Did you take any photos that year?
Well, my wedding picture, I looked pretty chubby. I got married in 1970, didn't run from 69 through 70 till January of 71. And I told my wife, I can't stand just sitting in this house. So in January, I started running and I bought a pair of shoes. They were Converse basketball shoes. I started running in. I got shin splints so bad, I had to quit for a couple of weeks. I started running again. And by beginning of probably June, this is January to June, I went from 190 to 128.
Wow. Where did you live there in the beginning of 1970?
Canton, Ohio.
Were there road races? When did racing go back on your radar?
My first race on the road was in Canton. It was a 20-mile race, and I ran 2 hours and 5 minutes or so, which wasn't too bad for the first race I run, and I won it. Then I continued, and from that point onward, I pretty much ran a race every weekend. Every weekend. I very rarely missed a weekend of races until some of my injuries happened. I had several
All right.
major injuries.
Let's talk about the injuries, but first, running a race every weekend, what distances were you running and how much mileage were you training?
Distances were 4 to 26 miles. Most of my early ones were 4, 5, 6 mile races. During my major racing times, out of a 2-year period, I won 60 races. And of course, I was running 52 races a year, probably, or close to that. And a lot of them, I started running very good times, and I was impressed. Well, to go back to the start of first road race, I finished the race, and this gentleman came up to me and asked me if I would join the running club in Akron, the Summit Athletic Club. His name was Jim Klett. He had a major influence on my road racing. He took me to probably 80% of the races. He actually went to the national races I ran. He went to quite a few of those. And of course, he spent his own money to go with me.
During that first year when you were running every weekend, I guess he was helping you find the races. What was it like in terms of facilities there? Were we getting timing? Was there entry fee? Was there any prizes? You won races during that period. Did you get any money or anything else?
Oh, never any money. They told us back then that if you got money, you lost your amateur status. So I never got a cent, nothing. The biggest prize I ever got was I ran a race in New Hampshire. I finished third or fourth in the race. It was a national race, and they gave me a 10-speed bike, which I brought home and sold.
How are you doing the splits? Were there, in these early races, was there timing? Were there split markers?
No, the only time in most of my races were at the finish line. I didn't know what I was running out there. I would usually lead the races off. I figured if I go out fast, they're not going to catch me. And that's how I trained for the races.
Sure. Go ahead.
I averaged 15 to 20 miles a day training.
And were you taking rest days or days light before you raced?
No, I had no rest days. I went 4 years and never missed a day of running, no matter what the weather was like.
Including racing almost every weekend.
Yes, that's what the race in it.
Wow.
Sometimes
right.
I ran 2 different races a weekend.
Now let's talk about your escalation of distances. 6 miles in college was your sweet spot and your best success. You went to longer races. You had great success at the national level, the AOU championships. When did you set your sights on Olympic trials and qualifying for those?
In my early races, I never even thought that I would reach that point to get to the Olympic trials. Never even spoke of it to anyone. Even Jim Klett, he says, you'll never reach to the Olympic trials. And one of these days I might think about it. Differences in my college and road racing times. I think I had mentioned my times in the 2, 3, and 6 miles. In the mile, I ran 4:10. 2 mile, I had 8:52. 3 mile, I ran 13:50. The 6 mile, which was now 10,000 meters, I ran 28:27. Then I ran from that 6 miles up to 26. I ran a 10 mile in 48. And my best marathon was 2 hours and 20 minutes.
What do you remember about the Olympic trials in 72?
Oh, we had a great time there. Sid and Dave and I, Sid Sink, Dave Waddle and I, we were all there together. And we would hang together most of the time, but Dave and I got together. Sid didn't want to go, but we went from Eugene to the Oregon coast during one of the days there. It was beautiful out there. It took us maybe 2 hours to get there. I didn't think about it when I was at the Olympic trials, but Bowerman at the trials offered the distance runners this new form of waffle running shoe. And I didn't know that only 10 or 12 people took advantage and got those. And I ran the race, the marathon, in those shoes. And I don't know if you can see them, but I still have mine. These are the
all right.
The original. Say that again. I didn't understand.
The background I usually have when I do these interviews on the podcast is the green and yellow Nike waffles, are the logo of this podcast.
Yes, I think I still have mine. My Nike waffles, those green and yellow ones.
Yeah, that's the one. It's the logo of the podcast. What about the trials and the race itself? Waddle said, what events were they in?
Waddle ran the 800 and the 1500, and you know the results of that one. Him and Jim Ryan, of course, Ryan was there, and Prefontaine, some big names, distance runners back then. Sid ran, I think, the 5,000 and the steeplechase, and he was disappointed he didn't qualify. They figured he'd qualify for the Olympics, but he didn't make it. Dave, of course, made it in the 800. The race I ran, the marathon there, it was about 85 degrees during the race. It was a tough race. And of course, there were three leaders, Moore and Shorter and Batchelor, or not Batchelor, Galloway. Shorter was first, then Kenny Moore, then Jeff Galloway. That's the order that they finished in. I ran, I think it was 225. They had run 215s. So I was way behind them. But I finished 12th, which I was very proud of.
Yeah. You went on then to run a lot of national AAU meets and win championships at various distances. Is there a best race or a best distance memory that you have?
Probably the Olympic trials I remember most, and I figured that's finishing 12th in the Olympic trials. I thought that was great. But I won 6 national AAU championships. They were 25, 30 kilometers all over the United States. Ran one in Central Park, New York. It was a great one in Central Park. You see this big park in the middle of New York, all this green area, and then buildings all the way around it. But it was 3 laps in Central Park. I broke the record that was, I think it was the national record at that time for the 30 kilometers. Then I ran the 25 kilometers in San Diego, another 25 in Kansas City. I won the 1 hour run. You run on a track for 1 hour and see how far you can go. I won that one year. I think it was 11 miles and something, but there were 6 national championships.
And when did your career wind down? When did you stop competing at that elite level?
I started developing injuries near the end of that period. This was in the late 70s, early 80s. I did a few dumb things during my running career. When I went to England, ran the Maxwell Marathon, that's where I ran my fastest time, was 2 hours and 20 minutes. I finished 17th, but at the 30-kilometer point, I was with a pack of about 10, and my Achilles tendon was hurting so bad I had to slow down. I ended up about 6-minute miles on the last 6 miles. The winners I was with at 30 kilometers, they ran 2:15s. So I'd lost 5 minutes on them during that last 6 miles. The reason that my Achilles was bothering me, the week before that race, I ran a 6 mile at Baldwin Wallace track. That's where I ran my 28-27 6 mile, and I strained the tendon there. That was 1 week before that marathon. So that was dumb.
Certainly in hindsight, yeah. Baldwin Wallace, that's where Larry Coy went to college.
Yes.
What kind of meet was it at the college? Open?
It was the All Ohio meet.
All right. You had that serious injury in the marathon. How long did that take you out? Were you able to race again after that, or was that the beginning of the end?
No, I took about 6 months off, never ran. And I was riding a bike and swimming and lifting weights. I'd gained a little few pounds. I went up to about 145. That's from 130. But I came back after about 6 months. I started training again, getting back in shape. And I ran several marathons after that time. Again, I ran another Olympic trial in 1976, but I got to about 20 miles and I had to drop because of that Achilles. I was running at a pace with a lot of the front guys. So it hurt me a lot.
Yeah. How did you adjust psychologically? We all have to go through these. I ran a 4:14 mile when I was a freshman in college, and I basically stepped in a hole at Malone the next fall, and that was it. I had another season, but I never really recovered. But we all go through transitions.
Yeah. The same thing happened to my daughter at Malone. Stepped in a hole playing Frisbee football. My second daughter was a 3-time All-Ohio in cross country at Carrollton and Canton South. And she's in their Hall of Fames, both schools. She won it in 1990 as a sophomore. She won the Division AAA. She won that championship.
Now, apart from genetics, did you have some contribution to her success? Were you a coach, mentor, or just cheerleader?
Oh, she, as I was, she loved to run. I would run with her during the summertime. We would run 6 to 10 miles from home during the weekends. And of course, she had the training all week. My first daughter also ran, but she wasn't as good as Christina.
Paul, you've had this nearly undefeated streak that ended at the state championship of high school, and you had to face a loss. Like all of us at some point hit the end of your elite racing career. How did you handle it? How was it psychologically to go through that you saw, I'm not going to be the elite runner, the time has come? And what did you get involved in?
Part of it was coaching at the high school. I coached 20 years at both track and cross country at Canton South High School in Canton. I was in Malone for 5 years. I coached there at Malone. Then from that point, I went to coaching at Carrollton High School. I had spent 2 years there. And when I totally started giving up the running, I coached for 5 years at a small school down around Carrollton here. It was Saline Go Local. But I coached track and cross country there. And from that point on, that's basically when I stopped running after those seasons ended. So that was about 2011, 2012. I think I made it pretty well up to the year 2000. And from that point, I did run very many races. I ran a few smaller races. I would finish maybe 5th or 10th, up to 10th, but I tried to keep going. It was depressing.
Yeah, it's such a big part of your life. Let's go back to the early 70s as a coach at Malone. I know one of your runners personally, Bill Scholl, is a long friend of mine. He was part of the NA championship team there. Did you train with the team as you were helping coach?
Yes, the year before I went to Malone, I had met one of the runners, Rick Horton, who was one of their best runners. I'd met him in high school, and the high school coach, where he had gone to Lincoln High School, he actually let me run some of the high school races, which is illegal now. But back then, they didn't think a whole lot about it. He went to Malone then, and I decided to go up to Malone and see what was going on up there with their cross-country team. And Jack Hazen asked me if I would like to run there with the guys. And I ran every workout for 5 years with them. And I'm proud to say, I think I had a big part in their national championship victory.
Do you remember, was it much of a surprise that they won? Did they go in confident? Was it an upset when they won the first championship?
No, they were doing quite well, but I think it was a surprise. I don't think they figured they were going to win it, but all of them were running very well at that point. I think he ran at Wisconsin or somewhere. I think it was Wisconsin, but it was a real surprise to Jack. Jack, he said, he was so proud of those kids when they came home, and I was too.
You mentioned that 12th place in the Olympic trials is maybe your proudest accomplishment. Certainly you had all those national titles, so many race wins, lots of marathon wins. How does that stack up to the successes and impact you had as a coach?
Said my daughter was probably the one I had the biggest impact on. I pushed her into it, and she loved to run also, especially when I was with her. But I think I had a big influence on a lot of my runners, my high school runners. I had several go to the state meets. Probably didn't have as many runners as I would wish to have. My boys team, I probably ended up with maybe 15 at the most runners. Girls, I usually had about 5. My daughter, the one I had mentioned that won the state, she spent her first 3 years at Carrollton High School. And I asked her if she would go to Canton South, where I was coaching. And she went her senior year. And she got All Ohio there also. And she's in both their Hall of Fames, Carrollton and Canton South. But most of the runners, they were great kids.
Your career spans then nearly all the 60s. And then the 70s, when the running craze and running popularity boom hit North America, and you continued on and then coaching the youth. What's your take on how running changed over those 50 years?
The high school, the numbers of kids that ran high schools was very low when I first started. The high school team might have had 20 boys on it, boys track team. We never had cross country, so never even thought of that. I didn't even know they had such a sport. That was a big shock when I went to college. I said, what is cross country? I never heard of this. But from high school, I noticed even when I got started in road racing, I'd go to a road race, there might be 30 to 50 runners in all different shapes and sizes. As I got into the later 70s or the mid 70s, the numbers of people started increasing to 100 to 200. And as I got more into the 70s, towards the end of the 70s, they starting to hit 500 to 1,000 runners, which 1,000 runners was amazing to me. That many kids out there at once, or people running. People, they just seemed like they came out of the woodwork. Everyone started running. And a big improvement then was, of course, the shoes. Shoes changed. My first running shoes were Converse. And I actually had Nike and Adidas. I had a contract with them to run in their shoes.
How much were they providing you? How many shoes were you going through when you were running every week races and every day for 4 years?
I was pretty easy on the shoes. I ran quite well foot-wise on the pavement, on the roads. It would last me probably 3 to 4 months. I only wore maybe 3 pairs of shoes during the year. Along with the shoes, they also gave me like bags and uniforms. At certain times of the year, I'd receive in the mail this big box full of all the things they wanted me to wear.
Did you stay a fan of the sport through all this time after you stopped competing? Have you been following the Olympics and the World Championships and other athletics along?
Oh, yes, all the time. I watched most of it, the races they're having recently. That's Budapest. U.S. was doing well. I'm impressed with the U.S. runners and the field events people, but very impressed with the runners from Africa, the Kenyans, the Ethiopians, It amazes me they run so well.
Did you have relationships and friendships with any of those runners from the 70s that were starting to represent the U.S.? Shorter, Galloway, Kenny Moore. Did you know those guys?
Yeah, I knew them, but I'd say some things to them at some of the track meets or cross country races. But it was the only runs I really had a big relationship was Sid Sink, Dave Waddle. And there, of course, were the guys on our Summit Athletic Club. And we had some good ones. Rick Sayer was a very good marathon runner, distance runner. And we had probably 15 to 20 road racing guys that always went together. And I stayed in contact with them.
Who are you still in contact with from those decades of earlier running?
Sid and I go to Bowling Green to a lot of the banquets they have and invited to the Hall of Fame inductees. I think I was there when Sid was inducted and Dave inducted into the Hall of Fames. I'm still very good friends with most of the Malone guys from that early 70s.
Tell me about the Legends race. This is a special event in Ohio.
It's run by Ted Roop. Is that the Legends you mean? The cross-country race, the Legends? Yes, I was invited to that several times. I took some of my runners up when I was in high school, coaching in high school. But Ted brought us all together several times at that race. I remember once Dave Waddle was there, myself, and maybe 7 or 8 other very good runners. He'd come there and he had asked us to talk to the kids. And I think that really got a lot of kids in when he'd bring in people like that, especially Dave Waddle.
Well, what kind of things would you talk about? What do you think was important in that kind of setting to talk to young runners?
Oh, the workouts, the kind of workouts they should be doing, what kind of shoes they should get, meals, what they should eat before a race. That was very important to me. My wife is Italian, so eat a lot of spaghetti. Competition was very important to me. I loved competition. And I talked to him and told him that competitive is going to stick with you the rest of your life.
Do you think Sid and Dave Waddle would enjoy doing an interview like this to tell to the community? A lot of these elite runners have done many interviews, had movies, shows made about them. Do you think this would interest them too?
Oh, I think they would if you could. If you could find them wherever they Sid lived in Bowling Green.
Oh, that's where I thought you might still have contact with them. Maybe you could put me in touch.
Oh, yeah, I could. Last time I knew he was living in Tennessee, I think. But I'd gotten several of the Sports Illustrated books, which I've taken to Dave and had him sign the pictures in them. But if you would like, I could contact them and see if they would be interested.
Yeah, if they listen to yours, or a lot of almost everybody's going to enjoy Sam Baer's interviews and some of those other ones, and they'll know what it's about. That it's just not running off statistics and things like that. It's more chat about the reflections that people. I'm not interviewing just elite runners. I'm interviewing lots of people across all kind of different impacts on the sport in the last 50 years. I have one friend who's I think a pretty good friend of Dave's through the guy from Western Pennsylvania. He ran at Central Park in probably 1905. They, as a team from Johnstown, Pennsylvania, won the National 50-mile championship.
Oh, wow.
3 guys from Pennsylvania. Well, he was just a couple years older than me. We both went to Indiana University of Pennsylvania, IUP. Kerry Green, he ran Boston 5 decades under 3 hours. And he's still running.
Oh, wow.
He's about 68, 69 now. So I don't think he's going to do another decade under 3 hours.
Yeah.
But
that's great.
He had Dave Waddle come and do some talks out at a physio clinic when he was studying that. He lives in Zanesville, Kerry Green does.
To mention Boston, I only ran Boston one time. I didn't think it was as tough as everyone says, especially the Heartbreak Hill. But when I ran Boston, it was 98 degrees at the start. It's the hottest Boston they've ever had. And I finished 11th.
I definitely know people who were in that race with you. I think Kerry was there. One friend who's done 25 in a row. He was definitely there that day. I talked with him about that superheated race. And
I'm on Facebook and I'm on a marathon group. These new groups of marathon runners, I can't believe what they're running. This one girl on there said she runs a marathon 5-6 weeks in a row. I told her, I said, I only ran 15 in my whole life, and you're running in a month. You're running 4 or 5 of them. I don't know how they hold up.
yeah, we're a different world. Better equipment, more shock absorption. There's all that kind of stuff, nutrition and everything.
Okay. Now, I saw a lot of pictures of Sam that you had put on Facebook. And I wasn't sure whether you wanted me to send you any or not.
Send as many as you want. What I do is I put a website together that lists all the podcast episodes. Then they get published everywhere on all the places that people get podcasts. And they're on YouTube. But on that website, I'm a tech guy, so I can take all the photos and whatever you send me. Larry Coy sent me 20 pictures of him in a jet and doing all kind of missions and stuff, which I will include in the final catalog. I've got a lot of Larry's pictures out there, and he sent a lot of running pictures when he had long hair, and then when he had it all cut off to be a Navy pilot.
Yeah, he put some really nice pictures on there.
I know everybody likes looking at them, especially some of the group shots and race shots and things people enjoy.
So one last thing, one of the races I ran, it's the only marathon that I won. It was a Cleveland marathon, but at the finish, there was Jesse Owens and Harrison Dillard, which presented the award, and I have their autographs on something somewhere. I've been looking all over for them, which that I can't lose. I can't lose those.
What year was that Cleveland Marathon that you won?
Oh, I can tell you right. I've got everything. 76. You know what? That's probably why I dropped out of the Olympic trials in 76. I won it May 9th, and the trials, I think, were in June or July. So I probably shouldn't have ran it that close.
I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, similar, but I was in high school through 1970s and just small town. I only really had 1 year of running. But when I turned 60, I got back on the track. I got in shape and ran Masters Athletics here in Ontario. And I got in shape to run the 800. Nobody wants to run the steeplechase, so I won the steeplechase.
I ran it once. Yeah. I ran the steeplechase once. That was the only time I wanted to do it.
That's great. You have an amazing span. Yeah, 410 mile all the way up to 220 marathon. So that's quite a span of performance at that high level. It's pretty amazing.
I wish I could get back to running. I started walking 4 miles a day about a month ago, and then I started getting pain in my arch. So I had to quit about a week ago. And I think it's gone, so I'm going to get back on the road.
There's a guy who ran in 1965 out of Seton Hall. He was an 800-meter specialist, and he ran in Ukraine, in Russia then, behind the Iron Curtain. And out on the podcast website, there's a link to the video of Jim McKay announcing that dual meet with Russia and him winning the 800 meters against the Russians.
Wow.
Very cool old video.
That's great.
I want to get one more thing on the recording. You talked about your racing strategy on the roads and you ran the mile. You didn't have a kick. Was that pretty much your whole career? Go out as fast as you could and make them catch you? Was that always your approach?
On most of the smaller road races, that's the way I approached it because I wasn't really fast. And a lot of the guys could outkick me. So I figured If I get away from them, they're not gonna catch me. Except when we got to the longer distances, I started staying with the pack or falling back a little and just waiting till they started to die. I did a 24-hour relay on the track with Carl Hatfield. I don't know if you know him.
I've
West
talked to
Virginia.
Carl. I need to re-interview him. The audio was bad,
Yeah.
but I talked to Carl. Yeah.
There were 9 of us. He asked me to come down, and we ran on Morgantown at the university. We ended up running 284 miles in 24 hours. And at that time, it was a second in the world, second longest. But of course, I don't know what they've run now. But I would never even think about running 50 miles. 26 is enough for me.
I ran a 12-hour overnight relay in Cairo, Egypt. I lived there a long time. And that was in the early 90s. And I had survived my injury. And I was running them at 5:20, between 5:20 and 5:30. And we had a whole bunch of local guys that could do that. But it was only 12 hours. And that's a significant difference in 24 hours.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That one we ran in West Virginia was 24 hours, but we would run each guy with 9 guys. They'd run a mile and hand off the baton and run another next one. The runner that had the best average for the 24, or actually it was 29, we ended up running, was a freshman, or he might have been a senior in high school at that time. I can't remember his name, but he had the best average in that. It was like 4:40.
Wow. Are you in touch with Carl Hatfield at all?
No, he's on my Facebook but I haven't seen him for many years. He was really a good runner. At about the same time I ran quite a few races against him. Beat him in a few, but I think he beat me more than I beat him.
I saw a picture with Len Critchko with Carl finished third, a guy from my college, Kim Burke, and a guy from Johnstown that I haven't been able to get a hold of, Steve Littleton. Did you ever run against that name?
Yeah, I remember it, but I don't know where.
Yeah, he went to UPJ, University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown, which was right beside my high school. So and I didn't have any kind of coaching, and he would come over and I'd say, just when I have a race, you run in lap 6 and pace me so I can get under 4:30. He said, no, it's illegal. I'm like, nobody in there. You're going to be out running 19 in lane 6, and you just paced me so I can break 4:30, but I couldn't get him to do it.
That's great.
It was fun days. We had a real track, so the UPJ runners would use it. All right. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. All the trouble.
Yeah, if you think of anybody who would like to have a chat, send me photos on the email. Just you can fire them off whenever, and I'll collect them and get them out there.
I'd have to have my daughter send them because I don't know how to do it. All right, thank you very much.
All right, nice meeting you, Paul. Bye-bye.
Yeah, it was great talking to you.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.